Hello, I'm Perry Blackshear. Our mutual benefactor, Prakash Keshavaya, has asked me to say a few words about my early life, the career, and maybe some unfinished business. He also advised me to look at a segment of the television program 60 Minutes that was devoted to the admission process and the high quality of students for the IITs in India. It showed examples of exuberant, accepted students who talked about how their family all conspired to help in the preparation for the exams. In particular, about a mother who would stay up all night to brew the tea in case her child who was studying for the exams needed refreshment. It made me reflect on the role that women have played in my life and chance had played in my life, and I thought I would stick to such a theme in what follows. Dorothy Eleanor Madeline Brighton Bucher Blackshear is strong woman number one. She was to reign over the first 20 years of my life. The beloved baby of her large immigrant family, valedictorian at her high school in Atlanta, she usually got her own way. If you look at those terrified eyes, you can see she'll have no trouble with the young Perry. There was the danger she may have overdone her efforts to civilize him. The inner engineer did emerge in time. It was the era of the soapbox derby. My engineering career was launched. In high school, I was hooked on math and chemistry. At Georgia Tech, I was introduced to mechanical engineering, encouraged by at least one professor to go into research, and was trained as an artilleryman. I graduated in 1943. I was welcomed immediately by the U.S. Army, and after more training, dispatched to India. While guarding the Lido airport from a weakened Japanese Air Force, I had a chance to do a little engineering on a machine gun mount, which the censors here excised from this report. In Lido's monsoon of 1944, I developed so-called jungle rot and was detached to the RAF Aircraft Recognition School in Ranchi as an instructor. What a different India it was. There I also found I enjoyed teaching. Back to the U.S. Army, which had moved into Burma as the Japanese retreated, I inherited this bamboo palace and the Chinese houseboy, Pamo, and had a taste of the shooting war. After the Central Burma campaign, I transferred into the OSS and was trading in Galle and what was then Ceylon with 16 seasoned cloak and dagger OSS veterans when the war ended. Our group of 17 remained together at war's end, and later on the troop ship back to New York, where we'd gathered in a gun turret, weather permitting, took turns reading Tolstoy's War and Peace aloud. We related what he wrote to what we'd just seen and how it might influence our plans. It was there that the resolve to do research had struck me, and to teach, it was clear that I needed more schooling. Chance again. Back to Georgia Tech and a master's degree with a thesis on why the pulse jet thrust decayed with increased flight speed. Thence to the Engine Research Center of NACA in Cleveland, where I'd been assured the opportunity to pursue the PhD at Case while doing research at the lab. And there, fate had in store for me strong woman number two, Gertrude Juliana Liebel, MD, just out of med school. She was interning at Cleveland City Hospital. After our first date, she took over Miss Dorothy's reign. Incidentally, I've heard Dr. Keshavaya also became engaged on this first date. So we were married and planned to finish our training before starting a family. It wasn't as simple as it sounds when the strong woman is also a strong Catholic of the old school. Our landlady was initially tolerant and an accommodating babysitter, but we needed a home. We planned to do it ourselves. She is, after all, a strong woman. You can imagine how busy the times were. Night classes, homework, construction time, lab time, and a 15-year-old Ford that demanded attention now and then. The roof was on, the windows installed by the time number two kid arrived, so we could Christmas at Gertrude's parents in Sheboygan. The years passed, the family grew, I passed my prelims, finished my coursework, finished the thesis, was awarded the PhD, and we were relishing the idea of a less hectic existence when I was visited by a German scientist, a veteran of the group at Peenemünde, who noticed these pictures on the wall. They were from an earlier work on acoustically disturbed Bunsen burner flames. I described the work that involved measuring the surface area of the flames and others of equally complicated shape. I built a surface of revolution planimeter out of two salvaged ball disc integrators and appropriate linkages. He'd always wanted one, didn't know one existed, so I gave it to him. About a month later, I received a letter from the head of the ME department at the University of Minnesota. He said a German scientist they had planned to hire to teach combustion had been warned by his physician that he'd not survive a winter in Minnesota. When asked to name a replacement, he'd named me. It's sobering to think how life-altering a seemingly casual encounter can be. Chance again. Off to Minnesota, where the conversion to bioengineer occurred. I'd gotten support from Office of Naval Research to modify a device I developed at NACA for measuring high gas temperatures. Two sonic flow orifices in series in a water-cooled probe. I proposed listening to the pressure fluctuations in the tube to infer the temperature fluctuations in the gas entering the first orifice. My first graduate student, Mike Fingerson, agreed to pursue the effort as his thesis. Mike returned a day with a counter proposal. Measure the heat flux fluctuations to an internally cooled thin film anemometer. It was a brilliant idea, but difficult. I'd been witness to a colleague's frustration in the use of hot wire anemometry at NACA under the most benign conditions. I dissuaded him. Back the next day he came with reassurances that he could overcome the difficulties. Again I dissuaded him. The third day he was more or less dragged by his roommate, Frank Norman, a flunked EE undergrad, source of the idea. He wouldn't let the conversation end until I agreed to thin film anemometry. Initially, we kept the sonic orifice and mounted the sensor upstream of the throat. Chance again. We hired Frank as a lab tech. The problem was tougher than I'd feared, but we finally had a tiny but rugged, compared to a hot wire, internally cooled anemometer that could measure the heating current required to maintain a constant surface temperature as the gas temperature or velocity fluctuated. We made the anemometer available to students measuring velocity distributions. One group measured the time-varying velocity distribution of blood in a dog's aorta and presented the results at a meeting of the engineers in biology and medicine. There were early attempts at an artificial heart among the presentations. Dorman was struck by the fact that the designs were the work of surgeons and the engineering was laughable. I was instructed to ask Gertrude how much shear stress and pressure extremes the blood components could withstand. I was the messenger. Gertrude, who by this time was working on her PhD in physiology, returned the verdict that it was the kind of question only an engineer would ask and the kind only an engineer could answer. We devised some of the tests for red blood cells and submitted a grant request. It came to the attention of our head of surgery, who dispatched a young resident, Eugene Bernstein. The bioengineering collaboration was launched. From the periphery, a messenger boy, I was drawn into the center of the program. Chance again. My focus shifted from heat and mass transfer in chemically reacting gases to heat, mass, and momentum transfer in fragile particle suspensions and liquids. I was able to keep up my work in combustion for some time. The two labs were known as the bleeders and the burners. We found the momentum transport of blood had been well studied, but not the effect of particle motion on the heat and mass transport. The augmentation of heat flux by cell motion and flowing blood was negligible, but the study by Avtar Singh Ahuja proved useful in suspensions of larger particles where considerable augmentation could be realized. Bellingham showed that mass transfer is significantly influenced by blood particles. The repulsion of flowing cells from surfaces was found to depend on size and stiffness of the cell. Cell adhesion to the wall proved useful in measuring the elastic properties of the red blood cell membrane, and the team of Hakmuth and Mohandas came to Minnesota from Duke for that purpose. Here's a feature that they discovered, the tether. Bernstein's studies set the limiting blood component destruction rate to the halving of the red blood cell lifespan to 60 days. Beautiful micropipette studies under Burton at McMaster's showed the membrane tension for lysis to be 30 dynes per centimeter. Forstrom and Kashavaya showed how these limits were reached in turbulent shear flow and in accelerating flow. If the suspending phase viscosity was less than 6 centipoise and the flow laminar, the cells remained compact and less vulnerable. If the suspending phase viscosity exceeded 6 centipoise or the flow turbulent, the cell was stretched into a more vulnerable ellipsoidal shape. We proceeded to build LVADs driven magnetically across the skin. Chance conversations led to the development of other devices. The first implanted drug delivery system, InfuseAid, and a percutaneous blood access button for frequent dialysis. Research extended to water movement across artery walls and its influence on the siting of atherosclerotic plaques. Engineering undergraduate students in the program often went to medical school. Only a single surgeon finished the PhD in an engineering curriculum. The list of unfinished business is long. The one closest to home is the discovery that a von Willebrand molecule, tiny compared to the cells, could have a threshold of lethal shear stress lower than the red blood cell. This stress unfolds the molecule, exposing sites that allow enzymatic clipping and reduce the molecule's ability to enable platelets to seal vascular leaks. LVADs and blood access fistulas need to be redesigned. I'd like to thank you once again for this honor, and once more express my gratitude to the strong women who guided me and are currently guiding me. Contrary to appearances, these direct descendants of Ladies Dorothy and Gertrude take their work very seriously. I also would like to thank the bright students and colleagues who made the bioengineering experience so rewarding. Special thanks are due to our lab wizard, the late, great Frank Dorman. Here we are seen with me festooned with devices that originated from our lab: an implanted infusion pump, an LVAD, and a blood access port for frequent dialysis. And finally, thanks to Prakash Kashavaya for the work he and Dick Forstrom did in establishing the stress threshold for RBCs, and whose exemplary generosity has made this moment possible. I hope the beneficiaries of this award will find the bioengineering experience as exhilarating as I did.